my name's Peyton. I'm a governance facilitator over at MakerDAO. You can find me on related channels as Pros11. And yeah, happy to be hosting the call today. Joined here by the lovely Monkey Irish. Want to know if you want to take care of your own introduction over there?
Yeah, thanks. And first, I want to mention that I'm really happy I'm going to be edited. So thank you, Peyton, for that and the magic hands that go on behind the scenes. I'm Robert Jordan. I'm proposing the Collateral Engineering Services core unit, and I've been with the foundation for about 2 years now. And so my role inside of the foundation, I initially started as an agile coach for all the engineering teams, working very closely with product and engineering and other groups to coordinate a lot of the efforts and really put a systemization or productization in place to help us make the donuts better, being the supply of die and everything that we're doing for the protocol. And as that matured in the foundation, it was really clear as we went to a transitionary period where the foundation was very clear. Yes, donuts, Derek. The foundation was shutting down or dissolving, is that there was a real need internally in the foundation to have somebody organize and coordinate the effort between the different teams that we have inside the foundation. So I moved in that role probably in October, November of last year, and that's what I've been doing since. So what's been really awesome about working for Maker is that I've got a very extensive background in information technology for the past 3 decades, and yes, I am dating myself. But I really, I came into this industry and I so enjoy it because I was very bored in 2017. I left the traditional IT world. And I say traditional, I mean product delivery, just simply chunking out the software, putting the processes in place, working with the teams, hiring, doing coaching and leadership, that type of work. And I enjoy that work, but it was just the industries that I was working within. And so when I found blockchain, I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the people. I fell in love with what we're doing. It's the Wild West. And I felt as if there was a lot of my background and skills that I could apply toward this newer industry and what we're doing and not having to reinvent the wheel, because a lot of what I've learned and I'm bringing into not only the foundation, but also in the core unit, is just tried and true best practices to really help us scale the collateral onboarding and also the offboarding as it relates to the protocol. So I could talk for much longer time about that, but I'm going to cut it right there and allow Peyton for you and others to ask me some questions.
Yeah, sounds good. And I imagine we're going to have quite a bit centering around the collateral engineering core unit that you proposed.
Yes.
So I guess before inviting the door over there, maybe want to give a little more information about your background. You mentioned this 30-year history, which is pretty impressive. I don't know if there's any particular jobs or tasks or things you're proud of you'd like to highlight that kind of make you well suited for where you ended up today.
Sure. Yeah, that's great. So I'll go way back, right? I'll go back to my education, and I was educated as a computer engineer, and it was interesting because at the time when I did graduate, the opportunities in especially being in engineering just really weren't available. I mean, I had the choice of going to Kennedy Space Center and working in COBOL, or I had a bunch of friends that I graduated with in college, and they were out, driving company cars and selling pharmaceuticals, and I'm like, oh, I want to do more of that. So out of college, I got a job in sales and in the channel working for Microsoft. And, this is back in the late 80s. And I was there for about 7 or 8 years. And it was just an amazing time and an amazing experience to kind of grow up within the computer industry, because that was the advent of so much of what we see today. So I lived through that and I directly experienced that. And then as I just progressed in my career and just doing a lot of different opportunities, and I would say the first decade of my career was in sales and marketing and business development. And so I have a really interesting background where I'm very technical, but I also have a great business sense to me. So it's this perfect combination of business and technology. But for the past 20 years, I've been immersed in the product and engineering world. And whether it's running a product management team, a product marketing team, running engineering teams, and everything in between. I've done hands-on work. I've been in the code bases. I've experienced the things that our engineers experience, and I get it. And so I have a lot of empathy as it relates to what we do as we produce our software and provide value into the marketplace, because that's really at the end of the day what it's all about. And so for the past 10 years or so, I've really spent a lot of time as it relates to iterative software development. And I know Agile can be kind of a tricky word to use. And I was trained very formally. There was a company called Rally Software. And Rally Software was really the poster child for Agile between like 2010, 2005 through 2015 or so. And it was sold to a different company. But the processes and Scrum and Agile and the transformation services, I literally learned from the giants that were in the industry. And it was amazing to see and experience that at that time. What I've learned since then is that it's not a one size fits all process. And as we, especially with Maker, and when I came on board in the foundation, we knew we were building teams not to last, which was a very interesting challenge for anyone that's done product management or been involved in the Agile space. So typically you build teams to last, right? And you work and you coach and you orchestrate, right? And it's a puzzle. It's an art. And there's a little bit of a science, but it's mostly an art. And so that was a really new experience for me, knowing that our teams were going to disband and go on to do something else. Hopefully a lot of them would come into the DAO, which they did. And so I've lived through that as well. And so now I'm really uniquely qualified for a role to take and do what I'm doing now with the core unit. And for me, it's combining this experience. When I take a look at what's truly needed with the collateral, and when I say collateral, there's a lot to it. I always look at areas like this as a product. And so I spent a lot of time talking about productization as it relates to the MIPS that I published around the CES core unit. And I really truly believe that, because it's a life cycle. And when we get into this, what we're realizing is that as we onboard collateral, there is a life cycle. And there's a reason why that we're doing this as well. And there are checkpoints and there's metrics along the way, because not all collateral stays the same as it goes through the system. And so we need to process it. And there was a lot of conversations about offboarding collateral and what that means and how do we do that, right? So we're starting to see this just naturally, organically come up inside of our forums, but to put some systematization and process around that, and also be able to talk specifically about how we're doing with our collateral, because we're the supply side. And our goal at the end of the day is to generate supply. There's the pull through or the demand side, right? But this core unit is firmly focused on working, obviously our core unit, but working very closely with like protocol engineering and risk and governance and oracles, right? There's a lot of stakeholders, and of course the real world side of things as well. There's a lot of crossover and a lot of collaboration, a lot of communication that we're needing to do as well. So I know it's a lot of words, but it's again, I could talk much more about each of those areas if there's a need to.
I would like if you could expand a little bit in terms of the project and product management side. Like, where do you see the differences coming in from the foundation to the DAO, as well as from traditional businesses in the DAO, in terms of like scaling products and projects?
Yeah, for me, it's more of a mindset. Right? Because when I see something, I see it as a product. Now, a product is a really tricky word, and it's a label. And these labels mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Hence, I found out a lot of this as I started working with the foundation and started talking about these concepts. And it was, there's some landmines out there. But conceptually, a product for me is something that we can identify that has a targeted use, right? It adds value. And it has a life cycle. Nothing is forever. And we all know this, especially in the crypto industry. We're very short-lived, and the way that we see the market moving, right, is that we're constantly iterating. Look at the iteration in Uniswap alone, right? Version 1, version 2, version 3, right? And to keep up with all of that. So looking at each piece of collateral as a product, but collectively, right, the product is all of our collateral. and making sure we have sound practices around managing that through the life cycle. Part of it is like, hey, where's the dashboard that shows the metrics as it relates to how well we're doing on ETH A or ETH B or whatever it might be, right? I'm just picking on those because those are the obvious ones, the biggest ones we have in our systems. I'm not going with the PSM and the USDC. I'm going to stay away from that one for a moment. But if we take the native crypto assets, is that it's really, Risk does a great job, right? And when we take a look at the assessments inside of Risk, and that initial evaluation, when you start to take a look at like liquidity and like the breadth, the depth, and order books, and there's a lot there that I think is super helpful at that moment in time. But we also have a life cycle that we're managing through, and so there's a lot of cooperation that we have with Risk as it relates to this productization effort. So I hope I'm directly answering your question, because it's as I compare it to other industries, what I'm really I view from my mindset for when I've been so long in product delivery, and product delivery involves product management, the product owner side of things, the engineering side of things, and also the operations of that. So it's a three-legged stool between product engineering and operations. And the operations I'm talking about are more specific to like DevOps, right? It's like, hey, if something happens inside of the system, how far can we let it go until we have a systemic breakdown, right? What are the margins for error that it's like, yeah, that thing happened, but it's not a full-on emergency, right? It's like, do we need to respond right now? There are certainly situations there we see that we have these downturns in our markets where you have to respond immediately, but is it like that in all cases, right? And we could talk more about that component because of some other thoughts that I have in this area as well.
Yeah, and we absolutely appreciate the question. So if any more of them, please do roll in. I thought one interesting aspect as you were talking about that came to mind for me was, I'm curious if you could maybe walk through kind of the differences in terms of how onboarding like a particular collateral looked like from the foundation side versus how it's going to look like from the core unit side with the process you'd envision, and maybe some of the differences there or things you're excited about. And
there are. Thanks, Peyton, for the question, because it's really important. So back before the community really took over the collateral onboarding process, we struggled internally in the foundation because it was like, we had single collateral Dai, right? And when I came on board, it was shortly before the Multi-Collateral Dai launch. And it was interesting because during that time, as you can imagine, there was a lot of conversation about like, wow, we want to launch with a gazillion collaterals, right? And it really wasn't possible because, just getting the architecture and the platform and the protocol updated and getting it out was a huge task. And that was one of my early responsibilities of taking on the coordination as it related to the Multi-Collateral Dai launch. And it was fascinating to jump in the middle of that and get going. But from a perspective of taking a look at what we did and then just really bringing the teams together, and internally we had to go through a process of, it's really interesting because I look at the polling that we do, the green light polling we do with the community. In some respects, there was like a mini version of that inside of the foundation. Obviously, a few people making those choices, but there was a lot of input from everyone inside of the foundation about what we'd like to onboard, and then like the potential challenges we would have with explaining that to the community, because it was more of a we're doing this and explaining later sort of process, and now it's the community deciding what is it that we're doing. And so what I'm looking at is that it's the iteration that in the November-ish timeframe when the collateral onboarding and the docs were published and everything, and that internal project yielded that website, which was an amazing cross-functional effort for a lot of people. So I just want to, kudos to everyone that was involved in doing the actual work to put that together. But we always knew that the community was going to iterate on that. And we've gotten to a point where I think we're there now, And so even yesterday, I just wanted to review those documents again. I spent some time on the plane, just kind of walking through the collateral onboarding documentation. And there's room for updates as well. But one of the things that to expedite what we're doing, there are two areas that I've identified. And the first one is that we have crypto native assets. and really spending time there, because the universe isn't as large as the other side of things, which I'll just term real world for the moment, but I won't talk about that right now. I'll get to that in just a moment. So crypto native assets is that you really hit the ceiling pretty quickly, and then for us it's a matter of like, what makes sense to onboard as it relates to collateral, and I do appreciate. I mean, part of the process and the feedback that we have into the productization cycle is absolutely from the community, and bringing all of that feedback and input into that. The greenlight polling is very helpful to do that. The actual implementation from a business perspective, it really can vary based upon what we want to do and what we want to maintain. Because, we take a look at like, the Protocol Engineering Group and the Oracle Group, right? They have a lot on their plate. And so it's really important that we, and it's great to have support behind something as it relates to collateral, but what is it going to actually do for the protocol? And so it's making sure that we're always being very attentive to that process and working very closely with the other core units that are involved in helping onboard the collateral. And so the crypto native assets is the one area. And I really want to do a healthy look at what we have and what's in the greenlight polls, and really what makes sense to onboard. And as part of that process, I'm going to mention this now, but it applies toward real world as well. There's a level of autonomy that I don't see yet as it relates to core units. And I'm going to talk about this on more of a global basis, because we're coming together. Each of our core units are coming together as a specific team of experts to do what they do. And my belief and my feeling has always been is that we need to rely on others to do what they do, and also do what I do, and then collaborate and meet in the middle. And right now is that I feel as if that there's, from an autonomy perspective, is that there's some experimentation that's needed. And this can apply toward multiple core units, but I'll specifically talk about the CES core unit. And as we're working with different collateral types, to be able to have, certain set limits. And I think Wouter's talked about this a good bit, and Juan, inside of the SES core unit with the parallelization effort. And to be able to have this staged environment, whereas, for example, if we identify an interesting collateral type, can we as a core unit simply run through the processes that we need to with the guardrails that are set up to make sure that, we have the checks and balances with the smart contracts and the oracles and risk and such. But can we quickly iterate and experiment? And I think we're doing some of this today with real world over different collateral types, and then prove before, having to go into a much more formal governance process. I mean, it's a trust relationship is really what this comes down to. And I'm not asking for the world on day one, but it's a crawl, walk, and run. And I think, others have suggested the same, where this gets opened up a little bit more, and it's based upon how well we do as a core unit and the success or not that we have from that. So for me, one of the things I'd like to figure out is that how do we add more autonomy to the process in a way that's there's risk and guardrails on that, but allows us to grow and allow potentially to experiment and grow the types of collaterals that we have. So that's the first side of things. The second side of things is truly focused on the real world side of what we're doing as a protocol. And there's so much work to be done there. And today it's about partnering with the different groups, like with Seb's group and Matthew's group and, Greg and what he's doing, right? To make sure that how can we be of service, because we're Collateral Engineering Services, right? And the technical talent that we'll have on the team as well will be supporting a lot of these efforts. And we're all going to grow and learn together. And so I think that there's a really important aspect of growing that side of the business and figuring that out. And I know it's early, and I know we're experimenting, and I appreciate all the work that everyone's doing there, but like, how do we figure out how to accelerate that? And right now I know it's hard to find patterns, because that type of collateral, when we connect it to the real world, it's so challenging, because it's like, if something happens off chain, how does that reflect it on chain, and all the nuances that happen, especially from a legal perspective. But I truly believe, this is a smart group of people across all of our core units. And I really do believe that we'll figure it out. It's just a matter of time. Hopefully that's helpful in answering your question.
Yeah, certainly. And good to see Derek chiming in the chat there about kind of the importance of the risk tiers and facilitating things that can be done as quick as possible. And I guess my next question is kind of in regards to that. You mentioned in your mandate wanting to have, trillions of dollars or trillions of Dai. Always got to check yourself there, right? In terms of generating from these collaterals.
Yeah.
Obviously, given the size of the current crypto market, probably not getting there with crypto native assets. So I do wonder like how the real world assets kind of filter into that risk tier. Like obviously there's a whole nother world to worry about with these, but given their importance of reaching those goals, I'm wondering if you have a game plan in terms of, are there certain levels you already see coming out in terms of real world assets? Are there type of collaterals you'd like to see us be working more quickly or more slowly with? Like just kind of a general field question for the real world side, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, and it's a great one because for me it's like where are the we talk, generally speaking, we talk a lot about different areas of real world, and so my big question is that where are the true buckets of money for us to access today, right? That's the assessment and the analysis, and I know there are others that definitely have an opinion and a bias as it relates to this. And on a macro level, one of the goals is that, and I'm going to sidetrack for just a moment because it's like what's important to mention is that the team, right? So it's me, right, at the moment, and there is the team is consisting of I am pulling on board 2 advisors, one of which I've identified. And I'll share shortly with that. And then there are permanent team members, and there's a concept of some variable team members. And inside of that is that it's just not the technology that's important, although it's a big component of that, right? It's making sure from a product perspective that we're managing it the way that a product would need to be managed. And part of that is identification, right? And to understand, just purely understanding the market, right? Understanding where those big buckets of money are at, understanding how accessible. It's great that we've got trillions of dollars of assets in real estate available, but is it truly available? And how much time should we really spend there? Right? I'm not saying the current work that we're doing, anything against that. That's just the questions that I'm going to be asking. And so I have the ability, I have a business background, a technical background. I don't know everything, and that's okay. But I know people that do know those things, and I know the questions to ask. And that's one of the biggest values that I think I bring into this overall equation. And so it's partnering with like Matthew and Seb and Greg initially, because those are the trailblazers right now. And for the first 6 months for us in the core unit, we've got to hire on the team, and I'm working very closely with the incubation talent unit in SES and TO, and he's doing an awesome job, and those folks in there. And so we're identifying smart contract engineers and some product people to start to fill those roles. But the first 6 months, we're building the team and getting our processes in place as it relates to the native crypto assets. And as we do that, we're also going to be partnering with the current real world asset teams to make sure that we're in step with them, right? To how and what do you need and when do you need that? Because when I talked to Seb about this, it was really clear is that, he's going to be looking for help to be able to implement some of what he's implementing, right? He might have budget to go out there and hire some contract engineers, or, I'll raise my hand and say, hey, how can we help you? Right. So it's an engineering services group that allows us to much more quickly be able to get to the end goal of creating supply. And so the specifics around, I have many ideas because of just context that I have in my background. Like, when I take a look at like trade receivables as an example, right? I've got some very close relationships in that area, and it's a huge industry. As it relates to trade receivables and factoring, insurances that go on top of that. But is it something where we can generate supply off of, and how challenging is that? Because when you talk to experts in those fields, there's enough challenges outside of the blockchain, let alone trying to connect the blockchain into that. So we have some real challenges here. And so the low-hanging fruit is the first place that it's the most obvious. And I think, for example, the work that Greg is doing is quite interesting, right? Because, you identify big buckets of money, and then you pull that over as an asset and collateralize that, and, hopefully things work. So, and there are names behind, those assets as well. But there's a lot of risk, obviously, that we have to assess as it relates to anything that comes from the off-chain, on-chain. So I'm not giving any specifics on like, oh, let's target this or target that, because for me, part of this process is to do a really deep analysis on where is the money and what can we truly get access to today. Yeah, that's the big question on my mind.
Certainly, and not the easiest question to tackle either, but definitely exciting to be seeing these kind of different groups trying different things. Gives us a lot of data to pull from and a lot of options for when the unit gets up and running.
Yeah, and I think by the beginning of next year is that I think those real world teams will have much more information and potentially some patterns. Because that's really, in supporting those teams, we're just like, hey, run with the ball, and where can we be of assistance to you? And as we figure that out, and also as we hire, that's the other thing too for the team. It's really clear to me now, after having some conversations with potential candidates and a variety of other people, is that the focus on crypto native assets and real world assets are very different. Right, from a productization perspective, and so it really looks as if there are two focuses. I was initially looking for a single product manager to do all of that, and what's really clear is that no, it's really a person to focus on the native crypto assets, because that alone is enough work, right? And then there's the other side of it, which is it's less about managing a product and more about finding where those assets are. Right, collaborating with those teams we currently have on the core units, and then being able to extend that and find other assets, through relationships, an individual might have, or I might have, or someone on the team might have, or someone in the community might have. Right, let's just open this up, because this is just not about who's on our team; it's about the collective voice and strength that we have in our community.
Definitely, and it's very impressive, wide-ranging group. I see Jerry popping on the video. You got a question you want to fire there?
I do. So you kind of discussed the structure and the strategy a bit. I'm curious though, like what kind of KPIs would you be using to be tracking your progress especially through the crawl, walk, run phase of progressing the core unit?
Yeah, I put some of I divided it into two phases as it relates into the MIP, and just as a reference to everyone on the call. So if you want to get more specific, you can see that in the MIP. But it truly is about building the team, and then so the transition from building the team and the KPIs for me, if supply is the metric, then or the supply is the goal, right? To scale Dai, is that then our metrics really need to be focused around the supply. And longer term, I'll throw this out here now, longer term, I would love to see an incentive model that's based upon how well that we're doing in creating that supply. Because that's really where the rubber hits the road, right? Everything else, right? It's like, yes, there are KPIs around the growth of individual collateral types, right? Or, for example, I always like, when I was hiring engineers, I would look at like, what's the time to first commit, right? For an engineer. And so when we start to onboard collateral, what's the time to first Dai, right? Those types of metrics are really important, because it shows us potentially where gaps are and how well we're doing. And so everything that you'll see is going to really be geared around how our supply is doing. And also, making sure that we're winding down things that aren't working for us anymore, right? There are always strategic reasons for onboarding collateral that, maybe doesn't have that big of a marketplace today. And I get that. And I'm fully on board with that. But there's also a lot of opportunity to, we don't have an unlimited budget. And so, right now, gas prices are a little bit different than they were a month or so ago, right? And thankfully that's the case, but that's not always going to be the case. And I know we have a lot going on with E2 and layer 2 solutions and all of that. So help is coming, but there's always going to be, it's like, we're going to outgrow the technology again, and then we're going to have issues, and then we'll solve those, and we'll do that again. So that's the nature of our beast. So I just want to make sure that and then there's also, right, it's like, how do we deal with the supply and layer 2 solutions, right? And it's great, like, the optimism work that's gone out, recently, and being able to make Dai available there, which is awesome. So again, my metrics, and it's really working with the team to make sure that we're doing the things that we're committing to as it relates to the community. But there's this build phase, and that's kind of this crawling phase, right? And the productization, right, to make sure that we've got systematic ways around our collateral to be able to on and offboard that very quickly, and then moving into, okay, we have a team, we're up and running, we're working very well with the core units. Some of that work is potentially being offloaded into our core unit, and then we could solely focus on supply, right? And then I do want to build incentives. Not right now, and I didn't go out with it initially, only because I felt it was premature to be able to define that. And I think it really does involve a community conversation around what that looks like, right? Because when I am others in our core unit are participating in generating Dai supply, I'm not the only team working on that, right? I see my core unit as being a revenue generating core unit, because that's what we're doing. But I'm not alone in that. And there are a lot of people, I'm building on the shoulders of giants. And so what does it actually look like? So, if we onboard, another, $500 million, $1 billion of Dai, right? You generate that as a supply. It's like, how do we share in that? Right? Because there's a lot of people involved in that process. So I'm throwing it out there because these conversations I would love to start having, and I'll start posting things around that to open that up. But I think that there's been a lot of challenge too around our incentive system as it relates to, obviously the go-to is like, let's do MKR incentives, which I do support, by the way, because having skin in the game, any technology company I've worked for, I've always had stock options or RTUs or whatever they might be called. And it really is a motivating factor. And I think they're very, very helpful. But I also think that there's some other incentives that we could potentially take a look at to maybe mix things up. Right? Because when you're trying to press down the gas really quickly and really hard, it's like the way you focus people a lot of times is on the way that you're going to incent them, especially in a sales and a marketing and growth perspective. So I'll leave that there.
Yeah, absolutely. And one area that's pretty tied with that, especially in terms of multi-team involvement and looking for big deals, hot topic lately is institutional vaults, right? Like whether it be for other lenders providing special facilities or even treasury options for other protocols. Was just curious if you had any thoughts in terms of, I guess we've also called them permission vaults, this idea that, meeting X, Y, and Z, and perhaps we get special rates to attract either more collaterals or bigger amounts of certain collaterals. That's been a big topic within the mandated actors lately. So just curious to hear your thoughts on that and where you would see your role playing in with the core unit. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great discussion. I haven't directly been involved in the mandated actors simply because I'm still going through the process, and I'll just give you some thoughts around that because when we take a look at collateral and attracting collateral into the system, there is there's always going to be incentives for any target that we go, whatever bucket of money there is out there, there's always going to be incentive structure. The reverse is also true too. There's sometimes where, like sharing the costs, if you will, as it relates to onboarding collateral isn't far-fetched either. And I've always believed, one of the things is that, if we take a look at just the Collateral Engineering Services core unit, is that, some might believe like, oh, you could really scale this thing and have a lot of engineers. And the reality is that there is some scale involved, but it really is about long-term leveraging third parties to be able to bring collateral into the system, right? How do we provide a systematic way to put some very healthy guardrails in place where we can enable third parties to be able to bring on collateral, right? And so I think the institutional vaults and such start to play into this role really well. Because, like we have to get out of the way. And incentives are just the nature of the beast. If we identify as a community, if we want something, it's like we have a dependency right now on a certain collateral that I think all of us can agree that we'd like to change, right? So how do we change that, right? Let's start from what we'd like to do, and then figure out what's the best way to work through that. I don't have any the details and specifics as it relates to institutional vaults. I haven't really been involved in those conversations, but as I get onboarded as the facilitator for the core unit, I'll definitely be much more involved in those discussions and have some thoughts and opinions as it relates to that. But I want to make sure obviously always attending to risk, because it's extremely important. We've done so well in the protocol, and this is I know we're kind of the granddaddy or the grandma in the project, and then the crypto world. I'm okay with that, right? Because it continues to go back to how great we are as a team of people and the quality that we take in our work, right? So kudos to us, and it's wonderful to hold that position, right? And I know we're also working, especially with the protocol engineering team and the Oracle team and others, to be much more innovative as it relates to the work that we're doing in our protocol. So it's let's do the things that allows us to achieve our goals. And I think collectively speaking, supply of Dai and then the demand, right? The pull through, right? I think we can all agree upon that those are key objectives for the protocol. Definitely.
And I think it just kind of highlights all the different avenues you can really be going down. Like, to me, I see your core unit as being a pretty key coordination factor, in addition to kind of almost like an auditing aspect as well, right? Because you have all these different groups trying to do their own things, and you're kind of shaping the overall picture. I don't know if you want to speak to your thoughts on that. It's popped into my mind here.
It's a great comment and a question, because it's like when I take a look at, in my conversations like with Wouter and talking about SES and the parallelization effort, it's like most of what happens today, right, in the ERC-20 tokens that we're onboarding, is that most of it is assessing it, right, making sure it's going to work, because we figured out the system, right? And so, and I think the nature of our core unit will also change as well. So it's interesting they mentioned the auditing piece of it, because as we grow and mature and then gain trust from across the core units, the nature of what we do, I think, could change dramatically as well. And I think that each of the core units, so you take a look at protocol engineering and oracles and risk, is that, we know we have to onboard collateral, and it's a component of what each of those groups do, but it's not the only thing that they do. And as I've explained to Nick and with Derek and Chris and others, is that, hey, we're looking to come in and help, right? And as we gain trust from the core units and the community, we'll determine what work can transition into the Collateral Engineering Services core unit, right? It doesn't mean that we exclude anybody, but we have to get into a mode of parallelization. I think that's one of the aspects when I see what Wouter's doing in SES and the work with Magic and others, is that we in the real world, like, my background has always been, we have multiple teams working on the code base at the same time. Now it's challenging, right? There's some inherent challenges as it relates to Ethereum, right? And just the way that everything works in our world. But I also believe those are just technical challenges and we can overcome them. And so having multiple teams being able to iterate over the software and having the checks and balances inside of that is just going to just tremendously help out our project, right? And I think that from there's going to be different roles, right? And I could see that, especially, let's say that, for example, that we can put a really healthy system in place and guardrails and such, and we have a lot of external, whether it be other core units or just third parties onboarding collateral. What you can see is that, a very strong auditing function inside of CES, because of, providing that level of service, because, we're not really figuring out, or the core units aren't figuring out how it's done, because we've already done that. It's more templated or playbook oriented. And we just have, we have a bunch of collateral that's coming into the system, right? So a lot of, from an orchestration perspective, could be very, very, very much a role that we play in the future. But again, it's going to take its shape the way it does. We know how this industry works. I'm just excited that we're going to have a focus. It's kind of like, what neck can I go choke, right? It's like, what's the one area I can go and ask the question? And right now, it's not centralization. It's just a consolidation of a lot of different functions into one area. but everyone has the ability to check in with that. But right now, it's like you have to go into multiple groups and get your answer as it relates to any of our collateral processes today. And that to me seems inefficient.
Definitely. And I reflect a lot about this kind of concept of taking responsibility for certain aspects, where it's not that you're trying to be the only one in charge, but you're rather saying, hey, I want to make sure this gets done because there's a lot of different moving pieces, and you need to have someone who's going to be accountable to the community saying, we're putting all of our time and effort into this vision. It's pretty inspiring.
Yeah. And I really do want to push on that point because my philosophy has always been, I'm going to take care of this. I'm agreeing to do this, right? And I'm making that commitment. And then others are doing the same thing in their areas. And we agree to meet in the middle and have that communication and collaboration. And what's so important is that we know that things change. And so as things change, we continue to communicate because milestones are milestones, right? And we yes, we don't want them to move, but there are unexpected things that do happen. So communication is such a key aspect as it relates to this. And especially this core unit, collaboration amongst the other core units is so amazingly important. And that's one of the things that I bring in from the foundation, because my role has been, since the day I've been in the foundation, has been one of communication and collaboration between all of the different groups inside. And especially through, as we transitioned out into the community and now the dissolution of the foundation, it was amazing the amount of work that we did to be able to prepare for that and like work with the different groups and go through, business processes and mind mapping and all sorts of exercises to help others identify. If you were to take out what we do as a foundation, what would you do with it? Right? What would you do with it? And a lot of what you're seeing, it kind of flowed out of that process and some of the core units, and it really got people thinking about how would a group move into the community and start to provide services? So that's been the nature of what I've been doing. And then before that, it's like, running engineering organizations or product organizations. And a lot of that in leadership is a matter of just listening to people and coaching. Player coach relationship for me is very important, where it's like, it's I love the sports analogy because like you take if you take a look at football, and I'm talking about European football. You hire these amazing players and they're so talented in their own right, but yet the coach is on the sideline, right? And he or she sees things about like a foot placement or the way they're holding their body and say, hey, come on over here. I have something to share with you, right? And to provide that level of feedback and input, because you take a look at like the talent that we have in this organization, it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing, right? And I'm not going to be the person that steps in and tells a smart contract engineer like, hey, check out this code over here or do this differently. That's not the role that I play, but I can put something in place that allows that person to be much more efficient in what they do, right? And I can ask the questions and then get the answers to the questions and provide the information where it's needed to help people be much more productive, not only in my own group, but also in other core units as well.
Absolutely. And I love that analogy too. Looks like we might have had a question there from Alec.
Yeah. So what are your specific feelings on just the scalability and sustainability of the core unit model in general?
Yeah, I love this question because so I'll talk about what I'm seeing right now. I see a number of inefficiencies that I'm a little bit concerned about, and I'll start there. Because, for example, when we in the governance and risk call yesterday, the conversation Seb was proposing as far as the corporate structure or the structure for the core unit. And, it's like, that's not unique to just his core unit because we all share that risk. So I get a little concerned about the duplication of work and the efficiencies associated with that. So that's one of the things I have an eye on, because it's like, yes, each core unit needs to do the best thing for themselves and for their teams. But at the same time is that, and yes, we're in a decentralized world. Yes, I get all those things, but there's the efficiencies that we also have to take a look at. And there's real money, right? So if real world finance or real world assets goes off and, they take and they spend all of this money to be able to set up this structure, I might have to do the exact same thing, right? And so, I mean, sure, I could probably leverage the work and the people and the contacts, but but there's some duplication that's involved, and it's just not only in like business formation, but there's some other areas. And I know SES is trying to step in and do a lot of the commonality, like the talent core unit is awesome, right? But like, when I take a look at like, I got to do accounting and I've got professional services, right? I have to select and pick something, and so do all the other core units. And I know we're running all of our own little companies, but I get a little concerned about some of the efficiencies, right? So that's one of the things that concerns me. I'll share another concern is that for me, I've said this and I'll say it again. I'm playing a dual role right now. I'm playing a facilitator and a CO of a company that's a core unit, and I think it's necessary at this moment. And in my the podcast, what's the name of that?
Yeah, pod session. Yeah.
Thank you. In that, I outlined a lot of my thoughts and feelings. I did decide to move forward in the dual role because I think it's necessary for now. But I think in the future, I do see these roles as being separate. I think as a facilitator and a head of a team lead, CO, whatever you want to call it, of a core unit, I think they are two separate roles. And I think over time that's going to happen. I think we're going to see the necessity of that. And so, but for me, I'm just being very transparent about what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. And I'm looking for feedback. And I'm also, for me, just right now, my stated direction is to do these roles. And then I will, in a short period of time, I will move into the CO role of the core unit and backfill my facilitator role at some point once things are up and running and it really makes sense to do that.
Hey there. Kind of on a related topic, and my apologies if it's already been addressed. I've been kind of in and out listening to multiple calls today. How many team members have already committed to join this core unit if you were given the green light?
So right now, the way that the budget works is that I have myself, 2 advisors, which are only getting incentivized on MKR. And then there's a product manager, a project manager, and 3 smart contract engineers. So a total of 6. There are 2 variable people, and the variation is, and I've outlined it in the budget as well, as far as it's like a $650K uplift that I'm not quite sure is going to sit in that budget based upon the initial conversations that I've had with other core units. Because one of the challenges that we face is that people that are experienced in engineering are coming into the blockchain world, and we want that to happen, but don't have any experience in the Maker protocol. So from a collateral perspective, what we do in the Collateral Engineering Services is a great training ground for like a 3-month period to bring someone in, to rotate them through, to understand the Taiwanese and the internals of our system, and then potentially go off into another core unit. So that's
how many of these roles have you got candidates that have committed or are at least being interviewed?
So I've got one of the advisor roles, myself obviously as a facilitator, and I'm in the interview process with several people as it relates to smart contract engineers. So the budget itself, the way it reads, is going to be considerably lower as it relates to the actual monies that are spent, because I'm not turned on day one, right? And that's one of the, just to make sure that we're very clear on that, is that yes, there are monies that are stated. If we were a fully hired team and we were running, then you would see, and we had the 2 variable positions filled, then you would see that budget. Other than that, it's going to be substantially lower.
So speaking of working in parallel tracks, since this involves smart contracts, this involves smart contracts work, but I don't see any allocation for audits and bug bounty. And I believe it says that you'll be leaning on protocol engineering for that. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
The only reason why that I put that in there, because at the moment, and when I talk with like Nick and Marc Andre and Derek and Chris, is that they're still going to continue to do that for the near term. And until that team is hired, and then, there's an element of trust and like the thumbs up, right? Of like Kurt and Chris go, on people on the team, then we'll all know that, hey, certain those parts of those functions we'll be able to migrate into the CES core unit. But until that happens, those folks are still going to continue to do that. So in some respects, it's like I'm organizing work for other core units initially. That's okay, because I think that type of consolidation is needed. But as we click forward, you'll see more of that move into the core unit. where appropriate, right? Because I don't want to extend my reach. Nick's very, very specific. Like, it's his ass on the line when something goes sideways in oracles, and I totally get it, right? So I'm not going to usurp any of that. But over time, I think what you'll see us taking on some more of those functions as a trust gets built to allow them to do other very innovative things. I hope that's answering your question, by the way.
Yeah, and can you give us an estimated cadence of work, of deliverables here? Like, assuming everything goes exactly as planned, like what's the throughput on a quarterly or semi-quarterly basis estimated to be?
It's a question that, specific-wise, I can't do that now until I have the team built and know exactly what I'm dealing with in the way of, like, so for example, when I take a look at doing the product backlog work and breaking down work and estimating that work, those estimations are based upon the types of people that I have involved. So, I mean, as a general perspective, what I would like to see is that obviously we take over the process as it relates to native crypto assets, right? We're able to do that, and our core units, being the oracles and the protocol engineering, they'll like check in with the process. But we can assume that basic work, right? Where the ERC-20s, it's very tried and true. A lot of it is just assessing to make sure that what we're putting in the code is going to work. And then the other perspective is that we're working directly with the real world groups, Greg, Matthew, Seb, others that pop up, to be plugged in to know, like, what are you going to be needing as we get ramped up. And we have engineers on our team. What are you going to needing as it relates to smart contract development work? Yes, some of that might be protocol engineering, right? Because it might be complex and touch a lot of different parts where they feel like they're the most qualified people to do that. Other pieces of that will naturally fit into our group. So it's really hard to give any throughput figures or metrics at this moment without really getting into and building those product backlogs. Once we do that, it's going to be completely transparent. It'll be a Clubhouse board. It'll be up there. We'll be tracking this. We'll be applying the principles of Agile and Scrum development. You'll see that. You'll see our throughput. You'll see what we're working on. All that will be transparent to the community.
And just to confirm, you envision us having, at least for now, 6 full-time members. Is that correct?
6 full-time members, right. The mix of that might change a little bit just based upon the types of people that we find. So, for example, I'd love to find someone like a Greg, as an example, that is not quite a product person, although it's like a business development analyst, that can really, it has the context, that knows that industry, can find those buckets of money, right? I'm not sure that person exists out there, but we kind of keep that in the background if we do come across someone like that. But primarily, it's focused on the smart contract development work, as it relates to obviously what protocol engineering is doing, what Oracle is doing, and some of what risk is doing. Because risk is going to do risk, regardless of what we do.
So I am looking through your budget, and between the requests for maker vesting, which is valued at a conservative about 2,000 maker. I'm just doing the math, and it looks like between salaries and maker, even at a $2,000 valuation of maker, puts you north of $550,000 per head. Can you maybe just give us a little more granularity as to why that much is needed?
The figures that I took were directly, so the SES, protocol engineering, and also the Oracle core unit. I've modeled it directly after the modelings as it relates to the salaries and it relate to the MKR incentives that are based upon that. So nothing should be out of line as it relates to that, because I thought that was, we work in a very interesting industry right now, and I have my opinions about it. Although if we're attracting the best talent, I'm always a person that says we do have to pay people market rate, and whatever that might be, and I believe that's reflected in the budget. So smart contract engineers are really expensive. And the vesting schedule, follows the vesting schedules of any of the other smart contract engineers that are in the other core units. So without, I mean, I'd have to, really drill in and pull up the spreadsheet and give some very specifics. I can do that. I'm happy to do that. But as a general comment, that's where the budget stands as it relates to especially those people.
Thank you. I don't have any further questions.
Awesome, and thanks for bringing those in, David. Notice we are here at the top of the hour. I guess some important things to note. This is going into the formal submission vote starting Monday as a core unit MIP set. So there will be 2 weeks for people to get out there and vote on the Collateral Engineering Services core unit. Might just take this moment to kick it back to you, Robert, and ask, is there anything the voters should know that we haven't covered so far?
Yeah, first off, I just appreciate the opportunity to be able to make the transition from the foundation into the DAO. It's an amazing group of people, and I was so excited. Initially myself, when I saw like, oh wow, we're really going to dissolve the foundation. This is really going to work. I was very skeptical, and I'm so encouraged now because the people that I so respect inside of the foundation, a lot of those people have transitioned off into the DAO, and they're very committed. And I'm so encouraged to be working side by side, not only with the people in the foundation that I've worked with in the past, but also new people in the community. And it for me, as you get to know me, you'll find that I'm very fair and very balanced. I ask a lot of questions. I do have thoughts and opinions, and a lot of times they don't apply because, I always try to look at like who has the best context for the subject matter, right? And I'll push people to make a decision, right? But it's really important that we as a community, we recognize that there are, so it's like delegation, right? Why would you delegate? You delegate because you trust people and their opinions, and also to get the job done. And the same is true here. So I'm just really excited to be part of this community. Thank you for the opportunity. If you do have questions about anything in the MIPS, please reach out to me. I'm more than happy to answer your questions. And vote yes.
There you go. And any best methods to reach you contact wise?
I'm Monkey Irish or monkey.irish everywhere. So reach out. I don't, the Twitter, I don't really, my Twitter handle, I just created, so there's not a lot there, but in the forums, in Discord, in Rocket Chat, just reach out. And then it's me at monkey.irish if you want to send me snail mail.
Excellent. Well, we super appreciate the time and how open you've been with all these various lines of questioning. And thank you also to everyone who came out and participated. This will be available on YouTube for further viewing. Shout out one more to the content production core unit for putting this together. That was CES. Thanks so much for the time, and hope everyone has a great rest of the day.